Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Portsmouth Coffee Talks Evening Edition Show. My name is James Slim Overton, and I'm here with co-host Leah Drake Stitz. She'll be back on soon. That's not her. But anyway, and Thomas the Colonel Chapman, and we have a special recurring a guest, attorney Alana Glover, and she is. I think this is your third time with us,
Yes,
and
my
she is always
third time.
yes, and she's always graciously agreed to come on, and we're probably going to have her back pretty soon. We have something else planned with her and another native son here, daughter from Virginia here. So stay tuned for that later on in the month of September. But anyway, Colonel, you want to go ahead and give the disclaimer and start the discussion with our special guest here today?
Okay. For those out there in electron lands watching it or listening to this program, the views stated on this program are the host and our guests and no one else, no third party. So hopefully we stay out of Facebook jail. And for those out there, if you missed the show, you can catch us on YouTube and Facebook as we go. So, Anna, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Just, pushing along, dealing with all these different legal issues that have been coming up, which I'm sure you all have seen over the last few months. So staying busy for sure.
Yes. So last time we talked, you were up in Baltimore, but you were transitioning down here. And in that Delta period that you were transitioning and was away from the law books, you let these folks went crazy.
Yeah.
So you're not throwing it back in your lap.
Yeah.
So the two big cases was Dobbs with Dobbs with turned over contraception or birth control or abortions, and supposedly kicked it back to the states, and the states are gone amok with it, especially in the Confederate states,
right?
To also put their women back in bondage and back in the slavery days. And then I guess the second big one would be the affirmative action judgment, where basically it was another what I call another race-based decision from this rogue Supreme Court, in my opinion, and others. So, what type of law you practice?
So basically, I practice labor and employment law. I represent a lot of businesses, small businesses to, different corporations, and really focusing on the importance for, employers protecting themselves. Really, both my parents were small business owners. And I know, of course, the importance of, small women and minority-owned businesses and employee policies and anti-discrimination policies. So I really work with companies to make sure those policies are up to date and that, they're prepared to run successfully as a business. I've also started to work more in diversity corporate counseling. So we work with companies to address what just happened in the Supreme Court and really to be able to maintain their DEI policies and maintain some of their affirmative action-based programs to be able to increase diversity and representation within the workplace.
Well, and I'm glad I sort of set you up for this because I knew you was going to say that. And so it leads to this question of the affirmative action judgment. And when you talk about diversity, since the right or the Confederates have made that word a negative or turned that whole discussion on reverse discrimination, they feel, our white brothers out there feel that they are being discriminated on,
right?
And so their spouses or whatever, white women, I believe, benefited more from affirmative action than anybody, and they have not seen it apply to them yet, but they're going to find out, especially when we do contracts. So you are doing these programs and diversity programs. So how are you in lockstep with the universities that know what's right is right and have to like change the name, and so we can keep these programs going?
Right. So basically, what happened in the decision before the Supreme Court, it was specifically applied to universities and places of higher education. But of course, now those same groups, in that case, it was a student for fair admissions, but now groups associated with them are now, of course, attacking DEI policies and also affirmative action and diversity policies for government contracting and subcontractors as well. So basically what we're doing is we're trying to get ahead of it before hopefully that comes before the Supreme Court and they, chip away at, the Title VII protections and the Civil Rights Act protections that protects the right for diverse groups to be able to consider for these opportunities. So what we do, we have higher education clients, for example, that even though we're not talking about the employment space, we help them, with some of their admissions, and we advise them of how they can still consider, or emphasize diversity at their institution. So after the decision, the court basically held that it is unconstitutional, or those specific race-based qualifications were unconstitutional to consider in the application process. They left a little loophole, which we've been promoting, is that to consider qualifications that reflect people's lived experiences. So unfortunately, we can't, keep the traditional, policies that we had, that I feel that, although we made a lot of progress, we had a lot more progress needed to be made. So now we have to work around to be able to promote diversity. Like I said, one thing we're advising our clients is to focus on lived experiences. We have to remove the term race specifically, from certain qualifications that we are considering. And we want to support our clients in being able to promote diversity, but also, preparing them that there's going to be certain groups and factions that are coming after them after the Supreme Court case that basically, ruled race-based considerations unconstitutional.
So basically, when I boil this down, is when I write my paragraph for admission into X university,
right,
and in the universities that were against were fighting it was I think University of North Carolina and Harvard.
Correct.
So when I write for my admission packet, I got to spell out, make sure that I put in that I'm an African American male. So it beats the right as far as I can put that in my lived experiences growing up as a male, a Black male in this country, and the racism that existed then, now, and in the future.
Right. Right.
And that has to be in my paper.
Yes. And the restriction is on the school. I think as a student applying, you definitely should always put, any of your lived experiences or any, adversarial times you came that would make you a better and more qualified candidate. But the schools now, when they're looking at, qualifications, they have to make sure they're cognizant, of how they are framing, considerations and their, diversity policies.
Right.
So that then someone doesn't come in, like you said, there's been a lot of uptick in reverse discrimination claims in the higher education space and also in the work space, so you have to make sure that they're able to still bring in diverse candidates, and they also have to try to protect themselves from those reverse discrimination claims that are streaming down the pipeline. So
yes. And it's very important. So, but speaking of that, before I go on with that, I'm proud of Norfolk State. This year, they had the highest enrollment that they've ever had in their history. They got kids that don't even have room to go into the dorms. They're housing them in the hotels downtown. So we need to put together, hopefully, when they get a program together, help them buy the next dorm. So, but that is a good piece that we need to do, is come back home to the HBCU schools and stop making, and especially the athletes that keep selling themselves out as what I call athletic slaves in these big University of Mississippi, Alabama, and these SEC schools that not getting anything from it. Come back to a place where you're going to get a real education, HBCU schools. So I just had to get that in and just had to do it. But could these universities do like the state of Alabama, who was told by the Supreme Court to say you have to carve out another minority district? They had two. They carved out one and made it down to one. The Supreme Court says you have to go back to two, but the state of Alabama says we ain't got to do nothing. So could these universities do that? And then B is, what is the remedy for the federal government to force them to carve out another minority district? Because we can't send the troops in like we did, 40 years, 50 years ago.
Yeah, I think that they could. I think that if they tried to, carve out a, separate, part specifically for diverse, groups such as, Black individuals or Native Americans, I think they would still have an issue now with this decision, depending on how the decision is read. The way that the majority wrote the opinion is they said, because there was this race-based classification, it failed to satisfy strict scrutiny. With strict scrutiny under the law, that is the highest level of scrutiny that any type of government classification has to meet. And most of the time, because, universities and certain entities, whether they're municipalities, they receive federal funding. That was really a key to this case as well. If you receive any type of federal funding, even if you're a state entity, you have to abide by these certain rules. So in that case, they said, a race-based classification based off, the current state of society today does not satisfy a compelling government interest and is not nearly tailored to satisfying that interest. Because they kind of set that standard, I think, to try to do that, although, it probably would be able to give people great opportunities. And like you said, maybe even have this environment, right? So for diverse communities to flourish, I think we would see the same challenges, arise that we just saw in this case, unfortunately. So like I said, they're everywhere. There's been, after the Supreme Court case, they've been challenging everything that they can challenge. So, I think it would be admirable, but I think that it would face the same challenge. And then, in a few years, we'd be right in the same spot that we're at today.
With that same principle, when we talk about the state of Alabama and the federal funds, I know the House of Representatives spends the money, they get the money and kicks it out there.
Right.
So the federal government, who sends that money down to the state, could they, since the state of Alabama does not want to carve out that second district, minority district, could they start cutting off funds?
They could.
Cut off or either slow down.
Yeah, listen, that's the thing about either the federal government or the state government. Even when we talk about the trickle effect, either I'm sure in Alabama or, here in Virginia and in Portsmouth, how money trickles down, from the state to Portsmouth and from the federal government to the state. So that money can always be cut off, and I think, like I said, when certain programs come, when you accept money, whether it's from the state at times or from the federal government, a lot of times, then you have to abide by those regulations or the rules that, are put in place by either that level of government. So I think that's definitely something that could happen in that scenario as well.
Interesting. And so actually, you mentioned this Supreme Court. I don't want to take all everybody else. I know they want to jump in, but I saw that Clarence Thomas, Uncle Thomas, wants to revisit a lot of these programs or laws that were passed. And one of them, I think, was on birth control, which is aligned with the abortion thing.
Right.
Act. So if they want to really, the religious right wants to get rid of all birth control. And so they've gone back, and I think there's a case going back against the IUD, saying that is a form of birth control, just like the morning after pill that they tried to put it in the mail, and a lot of states are saying you can't even give that because it basically is a medical pharmaceutical abortion. And then, so do you think that we'll get to the point to where we'll overturn Griswold?
I think that there may be people that try. I don't know that we would get to that point. I think that there's certain protections, or when in the case law, I believe it talks about, an individual, especially like a couple's right, a married couple's right to procreate. I think when we start to get in the waters of birth control and that level of it, now you could get to the question, are you now, overbearing on a, individual's right to procreate at all? Or then when you get to the concept of marriage, right? A married couple's right to procreate. So then I think that would be a little different. I think, when they talked about specifically abortion right, they talked about, a lot of it was like preservation of life. And they talked about a lot of when you get to the certain stage of pregnancy, when can you determine, what is a viable fetus, and how does this, I guess, infringe on an individual's right to access, of care. I think in that sense, they would be impinging on an individual's right. And I think there are certain protections when we get into talk of, like I said, conceptual relationships, and when you get into marriage, that conversation would get involved. And I think even when we talk more conservative, a lot of, the conservative individuals, they tend to protect or they advocate for the aspect of marriage. That's why, it was a lot of controversy when, gay marriage was being discussed and things like that. So I think when we get in that discussion, it's a little different. I think we might see some things, but I'd be interested if the court is willing to go that far. I think Justice Thomas is very interesting. I think he has different ideas. I know that there's some people that, may think similarly to him, but I don't know if they would go as far as he would. So I hope we don't see that day, but I'll keep it. The Supreme Court has surprised me thus far, so I'll keep an eye out on it.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the Supreme Court. I don't put nothing past the billionaires that have bought and sold Clarence Thomas, because he is owned by the billionaire class. And when you pass these kind of laws, these crazy laws, some states, especially in the Confederacy, I look at here's an example. The state of Missouri, they had passed a law saying they're out trying to outlaw emergency contraception and IUDs.
Yeah.
So what are the women in the state, when you take away IUDs, what does that tell you?
Right.
So you see how crazy, and so these are the same rights, and you say you're taking my right away as a woman to self-determination of reproductive that, and IUDs have been around forever.
Right.
So that's argument that you just said is contrary to what I just said.
And I think that was the issue for the case, like you said, is that when they took away that federal regulation and they left it up to the states, now there are some states that, of course, are attempting to cross the line. And, even those challenges, then when the state regulates it, the federal courts won't determine it. They'll go up to the Supreme Court of that state, whatever that title is. And the state courts will determine, what is acceptable or not. And that can go any different ways. For example, Louisiana states are totally different than most of the states in the country. Virginia even, does things differently than a lot of states. So, we have to keep an eye on it. But, I think in the future, there'll be more challenges. And like I said, we both said, the Supreme Court, I don't know if we can be surprised, because they've done a lot in a short amount of time. So.
Yeah, and I think Colonel too, Clarence Thomas is just one of the majority of those justices that be making those decisions. And I think going forward, we're going to have to start calling them out, because I bet you most people can't even call the other justice's name, without really thinking real hard. So they're going to have to be called out as well. We put a lot on Thomas, and rightfully so, because some of the decisions he makes just goes against what we as Black people feel that he should be doing. But we really gonna have to start calling those other people out and making sure that people know that it's a majority of them making those decisions and need to be called out. That's all I have to say, Leah.
What James, and it goes back to what we say time and time again on this show. It goes back to voting. It goes back to voting, 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 because those Republicans at the Supreme Court and the state courts, that was on their goal for the past 30, 40 years. It was their plan to stack those courts, and they have stacked them well. So in order for us to gain any kind of ground, we have to get out there and make our voices known. We have to get out there and vote, and so that some decisions can be made. There are going to have to be some decisions made, because you have to make people, you have to let them know you understand what's going on, and you're going to fight against those things that they're doing. But if we sit back and we are so complacent about everything that's taking place, we're not going to get anywhere at all. So it goes back to the voting booth. Everything goes back to the voting booth. I mean, we can't do anything about the Supreme Court now, because the president is saying now he don't think he should expand the court at all. But eventually, if things keep going, they're going to have to expand that court, or they're going to have to set some rules in place. Because it's not only Clarence Thomas who's taken, Alito has taken money from the rich folks as well. So there have to be some plans in place as to how to govern those individuals on the Supreme Court. And maybe they need term limits, because they're so comfortable knowing that nobody's going to put them out, because they're there for life and they can do whatever they want to do. And that's a sad state that we're in with the Supreme Court. They don't give much hope for anything right now, because we know they're only going in one direction.
But you know what, Leah, you mentioned
we have Katanji on there who can write some beautiful opposing decisions or papers on what's being taken place, but that doesn't help us any. Doesn't help us any at all. So,
well, you mentioned the term limits for the Supreme Court, and it take a constitutional convention to change the Constitution to put in. So that's not going to help it work. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's very rare that would happen. I think the last constitutional convention was long before I think any of us was really, around. But like, even when, there's been conversations about the Electoral College, if that is outdated, there's been conversations about term limits, but that would take, really the elected leaders, as you all stated, to call for that to take place and to be committed to making real changes, to the Constitution. I don't think it's likely, like I said, there's been multiple calls for it, but, we never know. Maybe in the future, as you said, we get out to vote, Leah, and to your point, that is so very important. I don't think President Biden will have the opportunity to affect the Supreme Court, but he has been able to appoint U.S. District Court and U.S. Court of Appeals judges. I think during his tenure, he's done the most Black women or minorities to federal courts. And the way most of these cases work, usually they go to the district court, and then they'll go to the U.S. Court of Appeals, and then they go to the Supreme Court. So hopefully, by some of these appointments, we can stop some of these things in their tracks before they get to the Supreme Court. But unfortunately, what's done now is done. And judges have to follow the rule of law. But like I stated, with some of the loopholes, for example, in this affirmative action decision, maybe some of the district court judges can find, because they're going to continue to challenge these provisions, but maybe they will find, if it doesn't necessarily state race, or if it does, then they'll still find that these diversity programs and these initiatives are still constitutional under the law.
So Alana,
Alana, you mentioned about the rules of law, and I just wonder sometimes, sometimes we as people, we look at people defending. I remember my father was a defense attorney, and people used to come to me and say, "How can he defend that guy? Everybody know he murdered that person." But it's a rule that everybody deserves representation. But when we look at some of the lawyers, and I know in law school you have at least 1 or 2 classes in ethics. So when we look at these attorneys out there defending people like Trump And, I mean, how in your legal circle, and you all see this, and especially when you're fresh coming out, of law school with those ethics and everything, and you just want to go out there and do the right thing. How do you all see these? And these are veteran people out there, lawyers out there, putting their licenses on the line, and now they're paying for it. Many of them are being indicted along with the person they defended. But
Right.
how do you all look at that, and see these veteran guys out there just taking on cases and lying for their clients?
Yeah, well, I think we're, not looking at it in a good way. If any attorney, when you become an attorney at whatever state you become barred in, we all have to follow professional ethics. That's something you're supposed to be committed to. And you can lose your law license, if you don't follow the code of ethics. And actually, as an attorney, if your client is violating, certain laws, or if you know that they're going to violate the law and that, it's going to cause harm to people, whether that's physically and economically, in certain cases, you have a duty to report that to the court because, we follow ethical guidelines. Every professional does not have to follow, ethical guidelines, but you as an attorney, when you're sworn into the state bar, the federal bar, that's what your duty is. So, I think that these attorneys in that case, they were willing to risk, their livelihood, their reputation, their bar license, for this individual. And, I think now they're paying for it, as you stated. I think that, and I know the people I surround myself, do not put their ethics on the line for clients. So, that also all comes to, what type of attorney that you are, and if you're willing to walk the line, that's what some attorneys, they try not to cross it. They try to go into that gray area. But
It's
to
gray
me,
area, yeah.
yeah, if you're going gray, you're too close to the line. So,
And plus,
don't,
many of them have been getting away with it for years, and
right.
just walking that thin line.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Well, I'm sorry, Leah. Go ahead.
Thomas has crossed that line numerous times, and he continues
Yeah.
to cross it, and he doesn't care. He does
Mm-hmm.
not care at all, So
Yeah.
apparently he missed the ethics class when they had it when he was in school.
Yes.
He skipped that class.
He skipped that class. That's
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
I think an issue with that is now they're trying to establish these, judicial rules and things like that. But I think that was a scenario where it was that gray line where it's like, yeah, that's somebody that probably shouldn't have done that. But technically they're saying, oh, well, it wasn't written out, clearly that I couldn't do that. But, generally ethically, like that probably wasn't something that you should have been involving yourself in. So now they're trying to revisit the rules and make sure that it is clear. So like you said, Leah, we don't have these justices, on the highest court of the land walking this gray line and taking money from individuals that they are presiding over cases for.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, you know what? You mentioned that the only way to get around this is us to come out and vote.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that the Republican Party does not want the other side or the Democratic Party or independents or anybody that doesn't see their way to vote. And it's hitting so close to home. Just recently, the city of Chesapeake, their city council voted 8-1. And I believe Ella is the only one that was the one vote.
Ella Ward, yes, she was.
Ward, and voted to kill 2 of the early voting sites in minority areas, districts, and to
Trickling down local.
and it's trickle it down, and also to cut out Sunday voting because we use church to the voting booth. It cut all that out.
To the polls. They don't want souls to polls anymore.
Yeah.
So that is a dangerous sign. So it is coming close to us. So Anna, what do you have to say to that?
Yeah, well, I think this is a scenario where, this is history repeating itself, and that's why it's so important to know your history. So like you can identify it. And then, of course, maybe there needs to be certain investigation of how you can challenge, this vote. But a lot of times the issue is when sometimes a vote like that happens, as you challenge it, by then the election's probably over, right? Mm-hmm. But you'll still have to challenge it in the court to try to change the law or create some law to prevent that. But, this isn't anything that I feel like, the Black community or minority communities are unfamiliar with. It used to be the poll tax. They used to make, certain group take tests to vote. So this is the same thing. This is trying to suppress certain individuals from voting. And I think what you said, Colonel, is right. Now we're identifying it. We know the issue. I think there need to be challenges. In Virginia, like I said, the law is a little different. So you have to challenge this local provision and go before the court or, your legislature to see if they can try to put some rules or regulations in place where that the local, governments can't be able to cut poll stations or make some type of requirement, that trickles down under to the local governments to say that you have to have early voting for this number of days, or you have to be able to allow Sunday voting. But without those regulations, sometimes, municipalities are allowed to do those things. And, I think all the time, everything that, isn't, I guess, right, that's not illegal. And that's the same thing that we did, when we were pursuing civil rights. There were a lot of things, racial things that were being done that technically were not illegal, but through advocacy and through us pursuing the changes of the law at the legislature and through the courts, that's how we rendered those things illegal. And that's how we ultimately, changed those things or prevented those things from happening in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And as we talk about voting, and it's very important, but what's discouraging, I saw before we came on, and this guy got a lot of press, got national press, a Black man in a T-shirt that had N words for Trump. Mm-hmm. And they were interviewing him, and he was saying that we need to make Trump king. And, and he probably votes. Yeah. So for every person you got like that, we don't need 5 people to get up off the sofa and go vote, because there are crazies out there like him that'll come on camera with N words for Trump. Now, Blacks for Trump, that's crazy. But to have that on his shirt and be on national news, I guess we just got to.
And the media seek those individuals out.
Oh, yeah, they seek those out. I mean, somebody talking intelligently wouldn't make the news.
They don't want anybody intelligent on the camera.
Yes. Well, Slim.
But Alana, going back to what you just said, though, unfortunately, so many of our members of our family don't know their history.
Our cousins.
They don't know about poll tax. They don't know about the price that people paid to give them the right to vote. They don't know the struggles that were made just so that we could go to the polls and vote. They don't know it because they've not been taught it, and that's the sad part about it. Because when I listen to some of these people who talk about voting and how insignificant they feel the voting is, I mean, I think back to all those people who were beaten, all those people who were killed just so that we can have the right to vote. And they don't think that there's any value in voting. They always say, well, my vote doesn't count. Every vote counts. I often talk about, I think it was in Northern Virginia, where they tossed a coin to see, because the election was so close that they were even till, they had to toss a coin to see who actually won the election. So, the voting, and I know it's upon us. We have to get out there. We have to talk to those people who are in our community to help them to understand how important it is to vote. We have to help them to understand what's at stake. We have so much at stake now that many of them don't know about that because they don't listen to the news. They're on Facebook, they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, but they don't listen to the news. So they really don't know what's going on. So we're in a catch-22 situation.
Yeah. And I think I agree with you, Ms. Leah, as well as that just the not teaching of the history. I mean, that was something that was intentionally done as well, and even now we see, we have the Stop Woke Act in Florida, that's being challenged in courts right now. But that was basically trying to prevent, Black, African-American history, different diverse histories taught in schools. And as you said, it's like if people don't know where they came from, sometimes it's hard for, you to know where you're going. Exactly. And like we just discussed, this is not new. A lot of times these things that we see are things that, parts of history that are repeating themselves. And like for me, for example, when I was in undergrad, I majored in African American studies, but, I went to school in Hampton Roads, and I was, not taught in depth, African American history, not in my schools. Of course, I was exposed to it at home, but, had I not, been exposed to that, I wouldn't have been, really taught that. And when you learn how, our parents or grandparents used to wait in lines, even just recently, I think in Georgia, they have people waiting in lines for 3 hours. And so just to vote.
And you couldn't give them any water. You couldn't give them any food,
Yeah, they don't understand if your vote wasn't important, why would they be trying so hard to
take it away from you?
But like you said, some people, they don't have access to that information. So a lot of people, and I'll say a lot of people my age or people, older than me or young, they just don't have access to that, and they don't have that same importance, right? That same dedication to going out and vote. And that's what hurts us. And it's not really just the presidential election, it's those midterm elections, like those midterm elections.
And it's the local elections.
Yeah, that they don't show up for, and that affects your life the most. Like the local elections and those midterms, they have a great effect on your everyday life. The federal is, of course, at the national level, but the local elections are almost more important for, your schools, for your roads, for just the basic things that you experience every day.
Exactly.
I want to circle back what Slim was talking about, the guy with the T-shirt with ends for Trump. It is widely known, for those who know, that Trump has paid those folks to fly around with him and to stand in front of the camera. The guy, what you'll see in all his, just about all of his
press conferences sitting behind him,
or those rallies he has that has Blacks for Trump. He's on their payroll, on Trump's payroll. They had this. There's a one black guy in the state of Georgia that was indicted recently, and he is on Trump's payroll. Anything to get $1, and sometimes a piece of silver is not worth it.
Not worth selling your soul.
Yes.
Who would put that on their shirt? And then associated with Trump. And a word he uses.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Trump used this one to actually call the DA in Atlanta, and also called all of America that looks like us. He says when he gets back in, he is going to get all of those riggers. Riggers. So he's not saying the word, but he's calling us riggers.
And so he's good at, because he'll explain it by saying, I'm talking about the people that rigged the election. But he's good at taking words like that and putting them, as a part of his, and then putting in his whistle and blowing it.
Yeah. So, that'd be my commercial.
And it gets to the people that he wants to get to.
Exactly.
I'd be running that commercial and saying the same thing in Philadelphia and the big cities across this country, starting now. Front runner is calling each one of you and your mama a rigger. What does that mean?
I want to ask Alana why I'm on this, and we can get back to some of the other subjects. You mentioned earlier when you first came on, you're kind of working your way, doing some things in DC, and you're kind of working your way. And I know there's an office here in Virginia Beach. Maybe this turns out to be a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer, but can I see you working your way? The Spinners used to have a song out called "I'm Working My Way Back to You." You remember, Leah? And Turner? That was a famous song, "Working My Way Back to You." Is that what we're seeing slowly?
Well, we actually have
possibility.
Yeah, we also actually have an office in Norfolk, Virginia, so even closer.
Norfolk, okay.
Yeah, even closer to Portsmouth. But I think we'll see what the future holds. I think right now we're in the DC region, but the office is actually in Reston, Virginia. So that's kind of Northern Virginia. So, I have a couple Virginia matters. I work a lot with the Richmond, Virginia office. And I also have some things. We actually are going to do some training at the Norfolk office coming up in September on this DEI stuff that we were just talking about, and just making sure, how do you remain in compliance and things like that. So I'm working my way back sometimes. We'll see if it's a full-time thing as, time goes along. But, Portsmouth is always going to be my home, Hampton Roads. So, I'll never venture too far away.
I selfishly asked that. Yeah, and I know you can work a wide area, so you can still do that in DC and work here too. But let me ask you this, and this is just what do you think about the Alabama the dog situation as you watch that, and all the memes and everything, but it did have a deep meaning what we saw happening.
Yeah, I think a lot's been going on in Alabama. I try to not soak it up every single day, just with a lot of the things that I come across. But I think in Alabama and in other states, along in that southern region, I think that a lot of things have been changing a little bit, for causing more complications for people that look like you and me, of course. So I think that, what the things going on now are, not new. And I think that they'll continue to go on. So I think it's, not unexpected, like what's happening there now.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, we're not going to stand here and let you do this to our brother. We're going to come to his aid. There was a time when they would have stood back.
Yeah.
And not engaged. But now.
And just filmed it and not do anything.
And filmed it and stay back. But now people are saying, oh, no, we're not going to allow this anymore.
Yeah, I don't know why they decided to jump on that man like that. I don't know why they thought it was a good idea.
He was doing his job, and they just didn't like what he just asked them to move their pontoon, whatever you call that thing, move it out of the way.
But like I said, in some of those states, like I don't know, maybe they felt emboldened. That's why
they felt privileged. They felt like they could do that.
Was that privilege? They can get away with it.
Either that or they didn't see that boat full of black folks.
But I think it is. I mean, the last time that I did see the update on it, I think the prosecutor did prosecute most of the people that initiated.
Yeah.
So I think that was the right thing to do, of course. And I don't know. Yeah, the chair. I think he had to be talked to.
They have a shirt out now.
That was clear battery.
Swing your chair.
Yeah, I think the chair, he got a little excited,
He did.
But I do think, like I said, I think in some of those areas, people feel emboldened, and we saw that firsthand. But it was good to see, as a community, how they came and came to back up that worker and didn't leave them out to be harmed, by a group of people. When you said like he was just doing his job, so. But hopefully that's a message across, like I said, there and other places for certain individuals not to do those type of things and not to try to harm people, just because they felt like it.
Exactly.
They got away with it too much. And people say, I've had enough. And you strike back. I'm going to get mine. Mm-hmm. And so the guy with the yes, he kind of went off the tip.
Yeah. But I mean, another interesting point that they said too there was, so often now we see things like that happen and people bring out guns and things like that. So, that was another,
everybody walked away.
Yeah, violence isn't a positive, but I'm glad that there wasn't any guns or, nobody, had to lose their life. Because, we know, and we see far too often, I still live in Baltimore, there's gun violence everywhere, and in this situation in particular, at least no one, brought out a gun and harmed somebody in that way. So.
Yeah.
I agree.
Speaking of Baltimore and Maryland, are you seeing a change in politics and in political actions since there have been some big changes at the governorship and some of the mayorships, or is it too early to tell? Still a process in motion.
I I've seen some change. I know here in Baltimore we have the same mayor. He's up for election in 2024 as well, but he's young. He's in his early 30s. So, I mean, I've seen some change as well. I think, in that sense in Baltimore, I mean, in any city, it takes time for things to change. I
Mhm.
think initiatives have been put into place, but it's something that took years to formulate to become the way it is. It's going to take years to change. So I think there's been some change. We also have Governor Wes Moore. I think there's been a lot of change. I think previously Baltimore wasn't supported as much, even though, we're a big part of Maryland. I think as Governor Wes Moore has really put a priority on supporting Baltimore and making sure Baltimore is supported just as much as the rest of Maryland. So I have seen a change there as well. So, I mean, I think Maryland has been making a lot of positive changes overall, and I think Baltimore, we're a big city. There's been a lot of historical aspects, issues with Baltimore. Like we're almost the home of redlining. Like you can see in Baltimore where certain areas have been highly invested in and other areas, have gotten little to no investment. But I think things are changing for the better. I think that, like I said, it's like things don't happen overnight, but as long as you have like a succession plan and you have people that are continuing to do the work, year after year and term after term, I do think there'll be, a lot of positive things that will continue to happen in Baltimore. And like I said, in the state of Maryland, Governor Wes Moore has been there maybe going on 2 years now,
Yeah.
or just finished up. So he has a full term and he could run again, so I think he'll have a lot of time to really make some in-depth changes, in the state of Maryland.
Could you explain that word redlining for those who missed this in down in Florida, since you can't have those kind of history classes, what redlining is?
Yeah, so redlining basically, at least here in Baltimore, like when you were talking about kind of districts earlier, here in the city, there were certain districts that were drawn and created, either at the local level, because Baltimore city government is a little different, and at the state level to formulate these districts. And then the way that money was distributed to these districts, it was distributed in a way that it was going for ours. I think in Maryland or in Baltimore, we call it like the black butterfly. So you'll see these districts where the majority of, Black people and minorities live, and you can see the line of where certain districts were receiving funding from the state and the local level, and then these districts were not receiving funding. So they talk about that term red line, basically drawing a red line around these certain places that were not, receiving funding. And now we see the result of that, probably 20 years later, whenever, the height of it was. And you can definitely see it. In Baltimore, you can drive from street to street. You can drive from one neighborhood and it's like, wow, looks totally different than you drive down another street. And it's totally disinvested in. So, that's something that, like I said, is being worked on. There's a lot of things that are changing, but it's something that like takes time because they spent 30 to 40 years creating the system. And then it takes time to kind of undo the system and try to rectify some of those injustices that took place.
Good.
Sort of like it was in the 70s when the term ghetto was used, and you had all these big cities, and every big city had prominent areas, but every big city had a ghetto.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
That is true.
Before we
The world is the ghetto.
before we leave, Anna, could you let everybody know where your law firm is, what the name, and how to get a hold of you?
Yep. So we are a national law firm. We're pretty much, I think we're almost in every state in the country. We have an office in Puerto Rico. My law firm is Jackson Lewis PC. You can get in contact with me probably by email. You can just Google Alana Glover, Jackson Lewis PC. You can email me. I believe my phone number might be up there as well. So I'm always open and ready to answer any questions. Like I said, I think, and I'll share with you all when it comes, I think next month, September 26th, we'll be having something here in Norfolk talking about, the DEI concerns and diversity initiatives for different companies, and also talking about just important, employee or employer aspects that need to be had. I think think it's very important to me, and I think why I love the practice area I'm in now. Because like I said, I know so many small businesses that are minority owned that, we just didn't have access to certain resources. So knowing the importance, if you're an entrepreneur, if you have a business, having an employee handbook is important. Having policies are important just for the success of your overall business. And we do a lot of constitutional law and handle a lot of issues such as that. So feel free to contact me. I'm always open for a discussion. Like I said, I float around to Norfolk and Portsmouth every now and then. So, and I try to help out as much as I can. My schedule gets a little hectic, but I try to talk to young people who are interested in law school and try to help in that way as well.
Well, Alana, this training is taking place on the 26th of September. This training will be open to those individuals who have small businesses in the area. And how would they be notified of the fact of the training, the time and the place and all of that?
Yeah, well, I will share the training, but you also can go to jacksonlewis.com and you can look at the Norfolk office. They have it already published that'll be going on. So you can just go there. I think there's like a registration where you just put in your name, probably your email, and then you can register for that event. So that'll be an event. And like I would definitely share it with all of you all. So I'll share it here with the Portsmouth Coffee Talk team. And if anyone else, needs it directly, they'll be able to get it from, my favorite host in the
city. That's right. Say it again. Your favorite what?
Host, all three.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, that's good because it's important that they learn. You have a small business that you learn all that you need to know, so that you can be successful.
Yes.
And if it's being offered, you need to take advantage of it. If you're in a small business, it's being offered, take advantage of the training.
Yes.
So we had somebody here to say good conversation with Attorney Glover, and his name is Shannon Glover. So
I wonder who that is. Who is that person? Do we know him? Do we know him?
His name sounds familiar.
And it just stood out. It just stood out. That's why I read it. But look, we want to thank you. But before we go, Leah, I know it's a few more days. You might want to let people know it's a few more days. They still have time to get tickets for the Grand Reunion.
Right. For the Grand Reunion, we will stop selling tickets on August the 31st. So if you've not gotten your ticket, you have 7 days. 7 days to get your ticket for the Grand Reunion, which I see Norcom Grand Reunion, which will be held September 29th, 30th, and October 1st. Friday night is our meet and greet, and we have, oh my goodness, Jim, help me.
Oh, you have
the band, Gator Armin, Gator Armin and his band. We also have She Ready, the comedian. And it's going to be a stroll down memory lane. It's going to be an amazing evening. On Saturday, it is our Oscar evening. That is the evening in which we give out the awards to our 45 notables who were nominated by their class members. And also, there are going to be some great things taking place that I can't share with you because you're going to be amazed when you see it. So get your tickets. Sunday, October 1st, we will be at Zion Baptist Church with Reverend Dr. Kevin Turner, with the Reverend Dr. Peggy Britt, who will be the musical directress for the day, for the evening, and for the alumni choir. So we are really excited. And James, let me just say one thing about the fellowship with Zion and Norcom. People ask, why are we going to Zion? Reverend Turner is not a Norcom graduate. However, Zion and Norcom has a rich history that goes back to the Chestnut Street School. The Chestnut Street School, which was the beginning of Norcom High School, was held at Zion Baptist Church. And the first graduating class from Israel Charles Norcom High School graduated at Zion Baptist Church. So there's a rich connection between the two. And that's why we're there. So we invite you to come out and join us Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And one thing I forgot, we have the wreath laying ceremony at Mr. Norcom's grave, which will be during the day on Friday. So we will notify you as to the time for the wreath laying ceremony as well. So come out and join us. As I stated, you have 7 days to get your tickets, and you have just a few more days to get your ads in. So get your ads in for the souvenir booklet and get your tickets for the 8th Grand Reunion of IC Norcom High School.
All right, all right. And for Leah, I wanted to show you this. I don't know. Can you see that?
I need that, James. I need that for Friday night. I'll take
Can
good
you
care
see
of it.
that? And this is one. These are mine. These are not given out. You have to earn these. This is my basketball letter. This is my track letter.
Alana, I want to tell you his basketball letter was earned from sitting on the bench. That's a special award.
Look, a letter is still a letter, right? Look,
A letter is still a letter, however you earn it. Somebody had to sit on the bench.
yeah.
Yeah.
I may need to borrow that for Friday night, James. We'll take good care of it.
No, okay, sure, sure.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Alana, it has truly been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm just bummed out that I didn't get you and my granddaughter connected. But there's still time. Time has not come to a close yet. So, but I appreciate you so very much. I appreciate your willingness to come on to Portsmouth Coffee Talk. And I know the times that I've called you, you've always been willing to talk with me. And for all of that, I do appreciate very much. So once again, thank you for coming on Portsmouth Coffee Talk. You've brought some valuable information on the show today. And hopefully those individuals who are out there listening and on Facebook or YouTube or however else James is going to put it out there, that you will take heed to those things that she said here on the show today. So once again, I want to thank you so very much for agreeing to come again on, and it's not your last time. Mark my words.
No,
Okay.
Okay, no, it's not. I'll be back for sure.
Because there's so
yeah,
many things happening in the legal arena that
Mhm.
we need to keep the public abreast of what's taking place in the legal arena. So we want to say thank you so very much.
look, and I want to tell people to stay tuned for a future show which involve Attorney Glover and Asia Moore, Aja Moore, Aja Moore. We've had both of those young ladies on at separate times, following their career, moving up, and we thought it would be nice to get them back on a show together and just to show how they have blossomed in their respective fields. So stay tuned for a future show involving these two young ladies sometime in September, we hope.
So I'll echo what Leah said, but I got a different spin. Yes,
Of course.
That's my colonel. What can I say?
I have been inspired by you. And if I was of Hindu faith, I would come back not as a nurse, professional nurse, what I am now, but I would come back an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
So I could also argue the rights and wrongs that are happening to us in this great country. But thank you for showing and coming up and explaining in simple terms, what's going on.
Yeah. And Colonel, I think you'd be a great attorney. So
he would,
Alana. Second career. I don't know, Colonel. Still time.
Alana, tell him it's never too late.
Yeah, it's not. Mm-hmm. But I just want to thank you all. Of course, I love coming on the show. And, even though I'm not in Portsmouth all the time, I can come here and talk to everyone and feel a little piece of home. So I appreciate you all, for having me. And I'm looking for coming on the show in the next couple of weeks, I'm guessing. And, of course, being able to talk to you all again. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching Portsmouth Coffee Talks evening show. And join us Monday as school is about to start. We're going to have some educators on and talk about the upcoming school year. So join us then, and I'm sure you'll enjoy that show as well. But thanks again, and take care, and we'll see you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.